Hey, One World Entertainment, episode 5 of Strange New Worlds is here. It's this. Puppets. Yes. Unfortunately, it's puppets. And this episode does two things. It rips off an episode of Angel, hence the puppets. And out of all the things, you'd think, like, there's no possible way that's what they actually ripped off. They ripped off Dallas.
You serious?
I'm absolutely 100% serious. For a simple way. Now, how do we get puppets? Well, rather than me explaining it properly, let's take a quick look at a bit of the clip that actually explains it. And then I'll break it down. This is what happened.
Apparently, the puppet matter from Little Ricky got cross-wired.
As well as something about the puppet's quantum particulates caused the energy in the transporter to expand outward across the ship.
Yep, a transporter accident. So, this episode is called Level 5 Transporter Accident or Incident. I think it's accident. And Scotty wants to try and set the record for the longest transporter, like transport something ever. That there's a guy on another ship, Declan something, I think it was Declan. It was either Derek or Declan, I'm pretty sure it's Declan. Who has the record, who bet Scotty by 0.16 or something fractions of a transporter to set the record for the longest transport. So Scotty wants to do it, and his plan is to transport his puppet, Little Al or something. I can't. They do name it, and it's a weird name. To transport it to that guy's ship to his quarters to scare the bejesus out of him. Little Ricky. That's what the puppet was called. Little Ricky. And they're traveling to Vulcan to Spock. They have a task to go back to Vulcan, and Spock wants to kind of re-establish logic and stuff anyway while they're, but for some reason they were told not to use warp speed, so they're to travel through this part of space at impulse for whatever reason. They already detect that there's an Orion ship out there, a pirate ship, but Pike doesn't care because Pike here has a brand new chair. Oh yes, brand new chair with all these hand controls and stuff, and he literally is like, oh yeah, who cares about the Orion pirates that's very close by when I got a new chair? And it's like, okay. So Scotty is going to try and transport this thing where Spock, and this is weird because I don't remember them saying anything about having to do this, but all of a sudden Spock is on a shuttlecraft putting out these beacons. It was like, where did this come from? I don't remember them saying anything about having to put beacons out and stuff like this, but Spock's out there, and while he's on his approach back to the Enterprise, Scotty tries to transport Little Ricky. And as soon as he transports it, something goes incredibly wrong, and all the crew, now the synopsis stuff said, some of the crew, it's the entire crew, start getting transported, and then the entire ship transports and vanishes in front of Spock. And Spock is trying to hail them, and then the ship reappears and he gets back on board, but there's nobody until he gets to the bridge. So Spock went from Shuttle Bay to the bridge without running into anybody. And when he gets to the bridge, Pike comes up from the chair and is a puppet. And then we get that explanation that somehow whatever happened little Ricky screwed up the transporter, Scotty screwed up, and the entire crew got transported into puppets. Then it turns out that none of them can operate anything because the ship doesn't recognize their hands or their bio signs, so they can't open doors, they can't use turbo lifts, they can't control the ship, they can't pilot it, they can't use phasers, they can't communicate without Spock's help. Now, by the way, the reason the ping is in this episode is Spock communicated with her, which we saw the image, which will come up again here somewhere, of him talking to her. She says, like, hey, you're passing through my area, I'm on my way back to Vulcan as well, so if you can give us basically a lift. And that's why she's on board the ship and turned into a puppet. Jesus Christ, I can't even believe this was real. But Spock, that's little Ricky. Spock is then trying to pilot the ship while Uhura needs communications. La'an is going apeshit because, oh, by the way, she broke up with Spock at the beginning of this episode. Kind of like she just felt their relationships ran its course, so whatever. She's going apeshit because she can't use phasers or anything. And then, of course, the Orion ship decides to approach them. And it hails them. So, none of them can open communications. Now, this is where it also gets weird, because they're telling you that they can't use the ship, and yet at the same time we're seeing them use the ship. Okay? They can't go through doors, but we see them constantly go through doors. All this type of stuff. So there's a lot of contradictions. They tell Spock, hey, look, open hailing frequencies, but audio only. So they do, and the Orions are like, hey, we've noticed that we're scanning your ship, and there's only one life sign on board. And Pike is like, well, whatever your signals are picking up, we can assure you we've a full complement, including our photon torpedoes, which we will fire at you if you get closer. And the ship is going to back away. They're like, okay, our bad, peace out. And they're kind of going away. And Uhura goes ending communications and hits the controls. Now remember, we've been told and they've confirmed that they cannot operate any of the controls. Except when Uhura hits it and accidentally activates the view screen. To which the Orions go, oh look, you're all puppets. To start with, why do the Orions know puppets? But okay. All this shit is happening. Oh yes, before that moment happens, La'an wants to be a test subject to transport. Scotty thinks he may have figured out how to transport you back. Spock has to do it. Transports La'an. She beams back, she's still a puppet, and they're like, nothing happened, and her arm pops off. She feels no pain, her arm pops off, and I can't believe I have to say, Spock has to sew it back on. I'm not lying. Spock sews her arm back on.
Right.
This guy, by the way, so once the Orions come on board, they beam on board. It's the part we saw in the trailer where Spock shoots one of them, and then they shoot at him, and they knock him out, and they capture him. They get to the bridge. This guy, who's now a puppet, instantly just becomes this little coward. And he spends the episode hiding down here. La'an here and number one try to attack the attackers. She walks up to one and one just boots her. And she goes flying into a door. Then number one runs up and starts punching one. And like he's just standing there looking at it as she's going to town. And she's like, are you even feeling this? And she's getting tired and he's just like... And he just goes, slap. And throws her away. Now remember that. Because that's important. That they can run up to you and have no effect because they are literally puppets that you can just swipe them away. That's vital for the end of this episode. They get to the bridge. What happens? Well, if you remember I said they can't use doors. The ship cannot recognize their biosigns or anything. The Orions come on. The female Captain Orion. Because, by the way, the females, if you didn't know. Because people might see this and go, oh, of course it's this woke, blah, blah, blah. Now, the females were always the leaders, basically, in the Orion. Kind of. Mostly. Of course, there was the Orion slave girls, but that wasn't true Orions themselves. Either way, they come on. She's all like, well, are you going to give me the codes to control the ship? And they all go, run away. And they run into the observation lounge, which also seems to double as Pike's ready room. How? When the doors don't recognize them, but the doors open, they run in there. There's no way out of that room, and yet when we get back with all of the main crew, they're in Pike's quarters. How? How did they get to Pike's quarters? Makes no sense. Spock obviously is captured. He's tied up. One of the Orions is trying to get information out and blah blah blah. It just kind of goes all over the place. They try and get back to the bridge. Oh yeah, before they run off the bridge and Pike gives up the chair to the Orion, I always say the woman who played the Ghost of Christmas Present in Scrooged, the Orion woman cuts her in half. Yeah. So, yeah, you guessed it, they're sewing her back together. Now remember, Spock is the only one who can do this stuff, and yet Nurse Chapel, Puppet Nurse Chapel, is the one stitching her back together. With all 4 fingers. Yep. They're trying to come up with plans how the hell to get these off the ship and do all of this crap. They did, by the way, contact Admiral April, and like he was just like, okay, we better not tell anyone these are puppets, and like we'll send a ship out to try and help you, but it'll take 2 days or something to get there. Don't worry about that. That never comes up ever again. Oh god. The episode plods along. They come up with a plan. Okay, here's the thing, we have to use chaos, but here's the thing. They're going to threaten to put... Well, they think they're going to threaten to put Spock out of the airlock. But they're not going to put Spock out the airlock. Because he's the only one who has the codes and can operate the ship and stuff. They captured Pike. And like they're literally just holding them up. And they put Pike in. And they don't like wait around and go, ooh, you know, you better give us the codes or else. They just instantly eject them out into space. And they're like, so you better decide whether or not to give us the codes, or we're just going to start blasting everyone out the airlock. Now, here's the thing about the moment of them doing that whole thing of blowing him out the airlock. Because it does take a few seconds for the door to open and stuff. Which means they do something. Something as soon as you see it coming, you're like, oh no, they're not going to do this, are they? And they absolutely do it. And of course, once they do it, there's nothing more that you can think of other than...
That is one big pile of shit.
Yeah. Have you guessed what they do Can you kind of figure it out yet? What they do? It should be pretty obvious at this stage. Pike's on one side of glass. Spock is on the other side of the glass. Have you guessed it yet? Has it come to mind yet? I'll give you a clue. Wrath of Khan. Hitting home yet? I'm gonna fly up to the image. Should be here. Yep. You guessed it. They start doing the whole the needs of the many outweigh. And that's as far as Pike gets to saying it before he gets sucked out into space. I shit you not. So are they telling us that Spock saying it to Kirk, and Spock even puts his hands on the glass and does the whole Vulcan salute. Are they telling us that that moment now in Wrath of Khan comes from Pike as a puppet? God, I hope not. This is fucking stupid. Turns out, though, much like La'an's arm popping off and her getting cut in half and sewed back together, they're puppets. They don't need oxygen. He's very much alive. And they somehow, while still in Pike's quarters, and yet we still don't know how in the name of hell they got to Pike's quarters, let Pike back into the ship. Where Pike comes up with an idea. This image becomes quite important too. We need to act like puppets. We tried doing it the normal way and it didn't work because we're puppets. We need to approach this like puppets. Which is where they come up with the grand plan of Scotty is going to design. Remember, they can't use anything. But Scotty then uses this crap to make a glove that can mimic the skin. And this is what they said, the skin of humans to open doors and stuff. He made that while still a puppet. Using equipment that we've already established they can't use. They come out of the door like this in a big cloak, and this Orion dude's like, hey, I thought there was only one Vulcan on board the ship. What's this? And then they go, da-da. And the guy stands there, watches them take off this cloak. Pike goes running at the guy and jumps on his face. Which then, number one, lies down on her all fours behind him and goes, now. So La'an runs up, runs along the wall, and drop kicks him, so he stumbles back and falls over number one. Remember what I said at the beginning when they first attacked the Orions? That when you run up, they have no effect on you and you can just swat them away. But now all of a sudden, you can kick them and they fall over and fall backwards. How? Then they get to the bridge. And they all start attacking the Orions on the bridge. And when they do, they're able to hold the Orions from moving. So one of the Orions goes to attack Umbega. And he can't move and he looks down. And I think it was a her on one leg and maybe La'an on the other leg. I can't quite remember. Maybe Ortega, whatever the hell she's called. This guy is still hiding behind this going, woo! All this chaos is happening. Umbega pulls out like 2 needles or nails or something and just starts running at the guy and starts stabbing him in the legs. Pike is attacking another one. He's wrapped on the head of another one. Number one is like La'an is popping up behind one going, here I am, and then vanishes as he swings around and, where am I over here, and swings around and manages to poke his eye and stuff. Goes on and on and on like this. Oh, Jesus Christ, this is real. Spock comes onto the bridge with T'Ping. No one reacts to Spock walking onto the bridge. The Orion captain bitch is still sitting there just staring around. The coward dude gets up and tries to run away, and she shoots him and blows a hole in his stomach, and he's still kind of fine. Now we have to pause this. By the way, the way they got Spock, rescued Spock, is the Ping got captured by the guy that was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he flames her hand. Now this guy should be dead, by the way, for what happens to him. He uses a little torch and flames her hand, and she goes, well, we don't need oxygen like puppets. I don't feel pain, and her hand's on fire. And she grabs his arm, and his coat goes on fire, and that dude starts panicking, runs around. His arms go more and more on fire, as opposed to, why don't you just take your jacket off that's on fire, dipshit? But no, he doesn't, and runs into a pylon and knocks himself out. Which means he's now knocked out on the ground, on fire. So he should be completely engulfed in fire and dead. She puts her hand out, unties Spock, and says, actually, believe it or not, I actually am in tremendous pain with the hand. They get to the bridge, and Spock comes up with the plan. Captain, we need to get you a chair, but I need to do something. And Pike says, whatever it is, Spock, just do it. So Spock picks Pike up and just goes, "Hurrah!" and launches him. And that's what this is. He's going across to the Orion bitch. And once he gets her on the ground, Spock jumps on the chair, and she immediately picks Pike up and just throws him away. Which again, they went from you have no effect on the Orions to now you do have effect on the Orions to you don't affect the Orion again. And she says to Spock, okay, you can sit in that chair all you want, but your crew's still puppets and we're still just going to kill everybody. Unless you give us the codes. What do you say? Spock's just sitting there, says nothing. And she pulls out her face and she's like, well, any last words? And he still says nothing. And he's just sitting there staring at her. And Puppet Pike comes up and goes, you see, while you've been talking to Spock, he's not answering because he's conserving oxygen. Because we're puppets and we don't need air. And Spock has turned off the life support. So you've about 5 seconds before you all pass out. And sure enough, they all pass out. That's how they get the ship back. Then Spock passes out. Because Pike keeps talking about the chair. He's so obsessed with the chair. He's like, yeah, the chair is great, blah, blah, blah. And Spock doesn't think to turn the life support back on. Now remember, they can't operate anything. They can't use doors, and yet Spock wakes up in sickbay. Which means they turned on life support. They're like, he goes, how did I get back here? They're all still puppets. And says, and Baker goes, well, we stuck an oxygen mask on you. Then Chapel says, and we stuck you on a gurney and wheeled you down here. They've come up, hey, we've managed to fix this. We know how to transport ourselves back to normal. And Pike goes, but, and well, Spock says, like, well, why haven't you done it yet? And they said, well, there's one thing we want to do. And they're all out in space, which we do have the images for, which you've probably seen, well, obviously you've seen, because they're floating about in here, but where is it? Didn't realize it was this far. Should be anywhere here. Where the hell is it? Good God, just look at the state. There you go. They're all floating around in space. Oh, by the way, when the ship was getting attacked by the Orions when they first turn in, like, you keep seeing different people in corridors, they're all going, "Wah!" and stuff like this. And then you see the ship turning, and a guy sliding across the bar and stuff. It was just like, what the fuck? But yeah, they're floating in space. Scotty's holding Ortiz, and she goes, torpedoes away, and he goes, huh, and she goes floating across space and all this stuff. The coward ensign dude is out there with them too. And he's still got a hole in his fucking chest. It's like, oh, so if you just transport yourselves, is he dead? Well, don't worry about that. Because as they're floating about in space, Spock is in his quarters with the Ping, who refused to go out in space because she found it unlogical, and they decide they pretty much want to get back together, and Spock starts kissing a puppet. Yep. He started kissing a puppet.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
This is real. And then he wakes up. Yep, he wakes up. And this is where the Dallas moment comes in. He wakes up in his quarters with the Ping. And goes, what happened? You're not a puppet anymore. And she's, I was never a puppet. What are you talking about? It turns out there was a transporter accident, but it wasn't on board the Enterprise. It was with Spock, where he was beamed off the shuttle, or possibly the shuttle was beamed back onto the ship, but something went wrong with the shuttle and the sensor pods he was putting out. What? Where did this come from? He's literally out in the shuttlecraft doing his job when Scotty on board the Enterprise transports little Ricky. Where did the problem come from? Oh, it was actually Spock who all the problems was with.
What the hell is even that?
Yeah. What the hell is even that? So, it was all a dream. They were never puppets. Spock dreamt it all from going on a mission in a shuttlecraft, which I don't remember them even saying that had to happen. And he just wakes up and it was all a dream. Yet there was no issue with the shuttlecraft. And they never showed us that there was an issue with the shuttlecraft. They didn't even hint at that, so you pulled a Dallas, but you did it completely wrong?
Well, come on!
Yeah. I've seen some bad Kurtzman track before, but this might be, hands down, like, the most over-the-top, ridiculous, biggest, stinking pile of dog shit we've ever seen. The fact that they wrote this, handed it to producers and showrunners, and they went, brilliant. What? How did this get approved? How did this happen? How much money did they spend to make all of these puppets? Because it's not just our main crew, you do see some of the other crew. I still can't believe that this thing is real. I cannot believe that I watched this episode start to finish and went, oh my god, they actually filmed this and thought this was a good idea to put out. 60 years worth of a history of this franchise, and this is what we ended up to. And you know how they end the episode? Spock sits up and is about to leave with the Ping out of his quarters and sees little Ricky is over in the corner. He goes, what's he doing here? And to Ping says, oh, little Ricky, Mr. Scott thought you could benefit from having him, and blah blah blah. And it just ends with Spock walking out of his quarters, staring over, and the camera just zooming in on little Ricky. And that's how the episode ends. I can't believe this episode is real. I good God. So, that is episode 5. Halfway now into season 4, the penultimate season of Strange New Worlds. The 5th gimmick episode in a row, ripping off Angel and Dallas. God help us all. And with that, I shall leave it there for this one. So do like, share, subscribe, hit that hype button, all that good stuff. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.